Yes, welcome to my nightmare. I think you're going to like it. As always, I am Christian Bladt here. Very excited for the idea that I had earlier this year. Was like, oh, Welcome to My Nightmare by Alice Cooper came out in 1975. When did it come out? Oh my God, February 28th. I did that about a week ago. So I'm glad I didn't do it 2 months from now. And I'm excited to have assembled what I'll call an all-star panel from 100 songs that define heavy metal. And of course, the CEO of Metal Blade Records, the great Brian Slagel. Brian, thank you for being here today. I appreciate it.
Anytime I can talk about Alice Cooper and specifically this record, I am in.
And also from 100 songs that define heavy metal, he has been in every episode, and I think we're going to insist he show up in all the rest. Author Martin Popoff, who, Martin, you have so many other things that I could say. What should we say also of podcasts?
Well, we have a Contrarians YouTube channel. We have History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff podcast. We've got Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast, and at martinpopoff.com, about 130 books.
Well,
I've wore the right shirt then.
I've just subscribed to all those podcasts and I've just ordered all of those books. So we're all set. And of course, from the Rockstrap podcast, comedian Don Jamieson. Hello, sir. Thank you for being here.
We are definitely not the Department of Youth.
No, exactly. But someone who's never been described as a cold Ethel, Mark Chicchini from the Three Sides of the Coin podcast. Mark, thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody, for being here. So excited to talk about Alice Cooper, sort of like you said, any Alice Cooper album, but the fact that we get to celebrate 50 years of Welcome to My Nightmare. Martin, as the one of us who is the author with the most books, and, you know, every episode of 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal starts with you giving some facts that every once in a while I'm like, oh, I knew a couple of those. But usually Brian and I will listen back to it and we're like, yeah, I didn't know like most of what he said. This is all great stuff. What are the things that we should know the most about Welcome to My Nightmare before we start diving into talking about the album itself?
Boy, okay, so yeah, February 28th, 1975, so it's the 50-year anniversary. So this is the first solo album from Alice. He breaks away from the band. There's various things have been said about that, but you know, part of it was that maybe the band wanted to you know, concentrate more on the music, and Alice says, oh, I wanted to concentrate more on the show and go even bigger kind of thing. There's also some skullduggery about the idea that you know, Alice is getting all the attention. Alice also himself is possibly a little resentful that he's doing all the work. He's doing all the interviews and stuff. You know, Alice and Shep possibly realizing that they can make more money as a solo artist. So there's this break. They're not getting along with Glenn Buxton. Muscle of Love's a bit of a drooping of an album. And things are kind of going downhill a little bit, and it's just kind of a big renewal. So they come out with this solo album, which you know, it's very much a Bob Ezrin joint. I guess I won't go into it too much, but it's essentially Alice and a whole lot of studio guys coming together to make this thing, and lots of arranging and orchestration and stuff. So it's a true solo album, but it's almost like an Alice and Bob Ezrin album.
Right. And is it true he legally changed his name to Alice Cooper so that he did that for financial reasons and didn't actually need to cut in the rest of the guys? He's just like, yeah, I'm Alice Cooper. Here's my album. I don't know if it's might be one of those, you know, one of those tall tales or something.
Yeah, it's kind of the way it works. It's not that he's doing it so he's not cutting in various, you know, solo member guys. I suppose you're referring to not cutting in the old guys on the new project, maybe.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah,
that's the cynic in me, Martin, that sees it that way.
He's laying more claim to the name as well, right? And we know later on there's actually going to be a band called Billion Dollar Babies who's going to fall flat on their face, and that's kind of the rest of the guys. And they make one album and put on this massive, expensive stage show that bombs, and then they go away. It's probably the best album cover of all this stuff. It's an amazing album cover, but it's terrible.
It's a great record too.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't worry. Next week, the 5 of us are going to get together and we're going to talk about Battle Axe. I believe that's the name of the album, right?
It is.
Well, I want to get all of your thoughts sort of on hearing this album for the first time. And as some of you know, I come to Alice in a later era because I was 13 when Trash came out. I fell in love with that, went back to the back catalog at a time where that wasn't easy to do. But Mark, I want to start with you because this is a great album, but it's also a departure from a lot of what you would have heard from Alice before. So do you just pick up the album, or had you heard any songs first? And what do you start to think as you dive into this record, Mark?
Well, 1975 was when the dam broke open for me. Here in Detroit, Rock City, of course, I have to say that. It's, but, you know, Alice was already a big deal. I was a fan of the hits because I used to go roller skating a lot. And I liked that sort of music already. I loved BTO, The Sweet, obviously Kiss, Alice Cooper, Deep Purple. So I actually got this. I bought Billion Dollar Babies first when I was, again, keep in mind, I was 10 in 1975. I bought this in 1976. I remember getting it. I remember, it's funny, the first time I heard it, I remember being a little let down with the title track because I was expecting, again, you know, go back to those bands I was listening to, including Alice, was the loud guitar. And when it came out, I was like, what's this? You know? And of course, you know, that was short lived because Devil's Food and, you know, the Black Widow, it you know, kind of saved it for me. But yeah, I mean, as I got older, I realized how different the band sounded. When I was a kid, I didn't realize that. Maybe that was part of it, but I didn't know how to process that sort of information when I was 11, 12 years old. It wasn't until I got older and I started playing in bands and stuff going, that's how come it didn't sound like that. You know what I mean? But overall, it's a great record. You know what I really love? And it's funny, the Alice Cooper group also used horns, but not to the extent like on this, you know, some folks has that big, you know, ballsy brass sound. And like Martin said, and it's so true. I really do see this in a lot of ways as a Bob Ezrin album. I mean, the orchestration on it, the musicality of it, it is different from the Alice Cooper group. Don't get me wrong, Ezrin participated a lot then too, but I think this was to an nth degree. But yeah, I mean, I love this record. It's a fave of mine, but I don't think it's as good as anything from Love It to Death forward. I mean, the first two Alice Cooper group albums, some patchy stuff on there, but with the exception of probably Muscle of Love, I think everything previous to this was better.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have Love It to Death, Killer, School's Out, Billion Dollar Babies. Eventually, you know, you're going to squeeze just a little bit too hard. And I love Muscle of Love. There's some great songs on it.
I like it.
Yeah.
But it's funny. It's like at that part in Pee-wee's Playhouse where he says, like, Dottie, like. Yeah, I liked it. But it's not that I loved it, where the other ones I loved.
Right. 100%. I agree with that. Brian, when do you first hear Welcome to My Nightmare? Song, album, the whole thing?
Well, I bought it the day it came out, went to the record store on my bike and bought it and biked home and listened to it. You know, it was interesting because I was a huge Alice Cooper fan of the band, obviously, all the stuff he did before this. And I will say that I love Muscle of Love. It's one of my favorite Alice Cooper records, but I also have a relationship with that record where we reissued it when we were at Warner Brothers in the early 90s, and we actually got it to be a gold record from there. I got to present that to Alice, so that's like one of the highlights of my career. So I actually like that better than School's Out. I don't like School's Out as a record at all, really. I do love the song, but the rest of the album I don't like at all. But anyway, that being said,
our audio audience can hear Don Jamieson burying his face right now.
Yeah.
By the way, I do agree with Brian. There's great songs on School's Out, but as a record, it's not my favorite. Don't hate it. Just saying, it's not my favorite. But back to you, Brian.
Correct. But this record, interestingly, was somewhat similar to that because it was very different. Like Mark had mentioned, the first track, you're expecting like the guitars to rip and everything. It doesn't. But the one thing that I noticed about this record was when I bought it, and I didn't know what to expect because clearly it's a solo record. It's going to be something different. It's not going to be like the records we've heard in the past. But there's an underlying evilness in this record, especially in the lyrics and the way Alice is singing, that while the music isn't super heavy in a lot of places, the lyrical content and his voice and vocals were very, I felt, heavier than what he had done before. And then, you get into Devil's Food and Black Widow and Department of Youth and Escape and, all this sort of stuff. And it's interesting because Martin mentioned it's a Bob Ezrin record, and 100%, it's a Bob Ezrin, Alice Cooper record. He just hired a bunch of guys to play on the record, who are all amazing players, by the way. But those two basically wrote most of the songs and put it together. He had some collaborative writers and stuff. But I loved it. From the moment I heard it, I really, really loved it. There was just something about that record. It was different. It's certainly different than the past stuff. And like I said, I'm a guitar guy, so I kind of miss the heavy guitars and everything. But there's something about that record. And back then I was 14 when the record came out. So I'd probably listen to it like over and over and over again for like the next several weeks, just constantly. That was all I listened to. And the more I listened to it, the more I liked it. And then I can't remember exactly when it came out, but around that same time, that TV special came out, where it was on ABC TV, and it was a special about the album, and they made like videos for all the songs. And that was really cool too, because there was a lot of really interesting kind of over the top stuff, and especially for 1975, a lot of really over the top stuff there too.
Yeah, the concert film aired. I guess it aired on, or it was released in November of that year. The Welcome to My Nightmare film, which I want to be showing that in the background while we're talking, but I don't know who has the copyright, so people just find that independently. Don, I want to, of course, give you. You look like you need to stand up and defend the honor of Schools Out, but also about Welcome to My Nightmare.
Well, yeah, listen, as you know, Brian is much, much older than me. So I didn't get into this album until, later. And it's funny, something Mark said struck me, which was at that young age, and even if 14 or 13 or whatever age you were when you heard it, I wasn't as invested in who was in the band. To me, Alice Cooper was the guy, and I didn't understand that this was something different than all the other songs and all the other albums. So when I heard it, it didn't really strike me as anything that different, because Alice had done a lot of weird things on previous albums. I mean, obviously the first two are completely experimental, and to this day, he's kept that weirdness as part of his recording, to put a song like Some Folks #4 on the album, very strange. But if you know Alice and you know his history, he loves vaudeville and he loves that old theater shtick and that old show busy stuff. So I didn't really take this as that big of a departure. And again, not knowing that these are totally different players didn't strike me as anything different. When you're 12, 13, 14, you hear Vincent Price's voice.
Yeah.
That was so incredible, because Vincent Price is still one of my favorite movie actors. Like if someone asks me, like if I saw like a stupid Paul Rudd film, I always go, is Vincent Price in that one?
But by the way, Paul Rudd's Bucket of Blood is coming out next year, so make sure that's the only
abominable
way to
Dr. Rudd is coming out soon. But that was, I remember how scary that was when I was a kid listening to that, and even the song Black Widow was really scary to me. So I just thought it, and of course, I was happy that Alice had continued with another song about necrophilia, because when you're 14, what's better than necrophilia?
You can never have too many songs about necrophilia. But yeah, the inclusion of Vincent Price, obviously, I am of the age where I heard Thriller long before I heard this, and that, you can say what you want about that style of music. You can say what you want about Michael Jackson's music. We're not even going to touch on any other aspects of his life, but it adds exactly what that song needs to have. Martin Popoff, Vincent Price speak in there. And I think that the fact that I realized, I'm like, oh, Alice did that first. All right, that makes sense. But yeah, it's such a great part of the album. And I like when, when they're doing longer shows, they'll actually play a recording and you'll hear Vincent Price to this day during some of that, which is always fun. One of the things that I didn't realize until recently, and by recently, I mean the last couple years, and I'm going to throw it to Martin on this, Escape is not an original song. I did not realize that. And I've heard the original version, and I'm glad I heard this one first, but it's almost the same, right? So what do you know about that happening? I mean, that seems like such an unlikely thing that you're going to have this concept record. Oh, but you're going to cover somebody else's song and, change it a little and bring it in here, Martin.
Well, yeah. Okay. So to start with Escape, I mean, Bob Ezrin had all these people who were part of his network, and Kim Fowley, if anybody knows Kim Fowley, he was a crazy promoter, nutty guy. Right. So he falls into the orbit, and they obviously get a song on Destroyer as well. So yeah, this comes from an entwined Kim Fowley situation, and they put it on here. One thing I like about Escape, so I'll kind of go through the album a little bit. Let's start at the end here. What I love about this one is I love the groove and the bass feel. And then I look up, the neat thing is that on the inner sleeve, they tell you per song exactly who's playing on them, right? And this one is Johnny Bedanjek, right? And Tony Levin doing that awesome rhythm section on this, right? So yeah, to go back, I mean, Alice Cooper, I got this as a new release too. I was 12. We were already nutty music fans for a couple years at that point. So I was all over it and all over waiting for the movie and that. But so Alice Cooper, we measured everything on heaviness, right? We had this mathematical system almost for heaviness. And so the Alice Cooper catalog already wasn't that heavy for us coming forward. And the other thing I have a bias of that I've fell into more recently is the old creepy stuff. I'm less a fan of, right? So to me, all that early Alice Cooper stuff, there's only two bands that sound like that: Alice Cooper and the Black and White period Blue Oyster Cult, right? And that's an old creepy thing. And people freak out when I say I love the second batch of 4 Black Sabbath albums way more than the first batch of 4, and on and on and on. So when this came out, it was like this sounded more like Kiss. It sounded less like creepy old Alice Cooper. And even mathematically speaking, there was Devil's Food on here. There was Black Widow. Department of Youth felt heavy enough. And then Cold Ethel was heavy, probably the heaviest song, and Escape, right? So this album had kind of a bright feel. And as Don was saying, he makes a good point, because at the time I felt the same thing. I don't recall really having it sink in that this is a solo album and the other ones are a band album. I don't remember having that feeling in a huge way, right? But yeah, I too did not like the song "Welcome to My Nightmare" and "Some Folks" and "Only Women Bleed." And then I was listening to it again to prepare here, and it's crazy how there's this suite of 3 creepy songs on side 2. Years ago, Stephen and the Awakening, all mellow, all like dark, strange, nightmarish Beatles kind of stuff. And then yeah, framed by the 2 heavy songs, or actually 3 on that side. But even those we weren't particularly into as kids. We loved the whole idea of Alice Cooper. But in terms of heaviness, it wasn't really there. And possibly this was the first Alice Cooper where I felt like we're getting in, and it's our group friends of albums. Like this was the one. I don't remember getting Muscle of Love as a new release, put it that way, right? So yeah, to me, this felt like this felt brighter and more interesting. I don't totally recall, realizing the arrangements and stuff. Another point I wanted to make about kind of the heaviness of this album, when it's so glooped up and glossed up with so much orchestration and horns and bell parts and all that weird stuff. Anytime there is a heavy song on here, it just sounds like electric guitar is just one of 25 things on the song. And it's like, but none of the songs feel like they're wired like these guys are thinking like a hard rock band. So that feels a little different than the heavier songs from the earlier Alice Cooper, where there seems to be a little more of a hoodlum bad boy commitment to those songs, right? When they were heavy. Here, you definitely nowadays, as you learn more about music, you just listen to it and go, this is not even a band. There's a bunch of guys from all over the place putting this together. And even the guys in the bands are these kind of like B grade. They're either session guys or guys who haven't been in huge bands, or the people we don't even know at all, like Whitey Glenn. So there's a lot of weirdness that way. But and another thing, the idea of this feeling like a Bob Ezrin album, this feels like Mutt Lange using City Boy as a test place to do all the things he wants to learn about production, the same way Flash in the Pan was sort of a test place for Vanda and Young to do everything they wanted to do production wise in their own band, Flash in the Pan, right? So yeah, that's kind of my thought of it. Brian, did you want to say something?
City Boy, phenomenal band.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What I was going to say, Martin, is that I would assume you'd remember buying Muscle of Love, because you'd have to figure out where are you going to put that on the shelf with your other records, because it came in that big box and you didn't really know how to fit it in there.
With panties inside it as well.
Yeah.
Oh, that was your favorite album, School's Out.
School's Out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But Brian's copy had panties, but we can't tell the story.
Right. And he still wears them, which is amazing.
So look, even a great, well-arranged conceptual album, ultimately it comes down to the songs. And Mark, as you're getting familiar with this album, when, you first have it, what songs start jumping out at you as like, okay, are they the heavier ones? Are they Department of Youth, Escape?
100%. And to go back to something that Martin was talking about, when you hear modern day Alice do Welcome to My Nightmare, especially when he was doing it in the 80s, with Kane.
Yeah.
It's when you start going now as an adult, you're like, you know what? I'm glad they didn't make Welcome to My Night, the title track like that. I'm glad it had the horns, and I just think it's a far more interesting song than the way that he played it live. Especially in that, I don't know if you want to call it, because that wasn't quite hair metal Alice yet. And that's one thing I'd love to get everybody's opinion on. It's funny. People ask me all the time, did I ever drop out of the whole Kiss thing at any certain time? And I was like, surprisingly, no, but I didn't care for certain times. I got to admit, when hair metal Alice came, I dropped. I did not like it at all. But I'll get back to the original question. Yeah, it was the heavier songs. It's certainly Devil's Food and the Black Widow. And something as a drummer that always drove me crazy is that offbeat part in Only Women Bleed. To this day, it drives me crazy. If you guys know what part I'm talking about, there's the drums don't. He's like in the middle of the beat, and it goes somewhere it shouldn't go. Drives me crazy. But Department of Youth, obviously love. And that's another thing, I don't remember which gentleman here mentioned the evilness, but also there's the sense of humor, Alice with the Donny Osmond thing at the end. I mean, he really was conscious of almost Marianne-ish, if you know what I mean, from $1 Billion Babies, where he threw something in that you weren't expecting because he wanted to lighten it up a little bit. And also too, back to my point of, not knowing who was playing. I got $1 Billion Babies probably in 75. So again, I was 10. So that was right when I was really starting to buy a lot of records. That was really my thing. And I remember, I'm a Kiss fan. I'm just, at that point, I'm just staring at all the guys and how crazy they looked, especially Neil Smith with the long hair. And then when I bought this, I'm going, gosh, none of those guys are on this. Again, I'm a kid. I don't know, but I'm
Sure,
like,
of course.
I thought that was his band, and those guys would look so cool and creepy and everything. And I'm like, well, maybe that's how come. Again, going back to it, my young mind, maybe that's why they started with, an acoustic guitar this time, because it didn't, sound that. But also, too, as Alice fans, I mean, Crazy Little Child. I mean, something like that really ties into, From Muscle of Love into something like Some Folks. Alice, you're right, did have that theatricality about him, even audio wise. Obviously again, on the much maligned with you guys, I guess, School's Out. I love School's Out, but the whole the West Side Story. But
Gutter Cats versus the Jets. Yeah.
I you know what? I love that. And I still think one of the great gems of his catalog is Public Animal #9.
Thank you, Mark. That's in your face, Brian.
No, that's a great song, but it's like that's all there is. There's that and School's Out. That's pretty much it.
I'm gonna do what I do to Brandel. Will you look at the time?
Well, it's interesting though. So we've broken the news here, Mark, that you were not as put off by Shandy and She's So European as you were by Raise Your Fist and Yell, and I find that to be the headline from this conversation.
Hey, side 2 of Raise Your Fist and Yell is super heavy.
Well, hold on a second. It's that one I liked. I didn't like
Constrictor's the other one.
Constrict.
No, he's.
Oh, you're talking about Trash.
Yes.
He's talking about the one with Hey Stupid on it.
That's Hey Stupid, but yeah,
Trash. Is that Trash?
Because I've talked to Mark before about like when I get into bands. So I get into Alice with Trash, I get into Aerosmith with Pump, and these are all the points that you hate those bands. What were you gonna say, Brian? Sorry.
Oh, which song is Poison on? Which album is Poison?
That's on Trash.
Wait, but Hey Stupid's the following.
Hey Stupid
There's a Hey Stupid and a Trash.
Yeah.
It is on that one.
It's the title track from Hey Stupid. Yes.
Yeah. That's the one he's talking
about. Which
also
has right. Feed My Frankenstein.
Although I do like that, because it sounds like a Motley Crue song. I like Feed My Frankenstein a lot. I think that's got a great groove.
Written by Zodiac Mindwarp.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So sorry. You were talking about hair metal Alice, and I was thinking of Metalhead Alice, which
I liked Metalhead Alice.
Okay.
I saw that tour. Matter of fact, that TV or the home video, I was at that show here.
Yeah, that was in Detroit. It was like Halloween night, 1986 or whatever. The Nightmare Returns.
Here in Detroit, this is back in the day. You can look this up, you younger guys. When we used to burn our city for some stupid reason on Devil's Night, and that show was that night, and man, all I remember is there was cops fucking surround Julius Arena like you would not believe. But you
would think you were in Philadelphia for the way that it was going.
I want to go off topic for one quick second
and
ask Mark his opinion of Dynasty by Kiss.
Oh, I love it. It's great.
Okay, good. That's the right answer.
I agree. No, it's that's one of those ones, a perfect example, talking about Dynasty, 2000 Man, obviously that as an Ace song. You go back and you hear the Stones version. It's like the first time I ever dusted off Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. And I'm like, oh man, that Nirvana version is so much better.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 2000 Man, you're like, I don't even think Mick and Keith have any idea they recorded that song, but it's such a great.
I want to know how Ace went, okay, I'm going to turn that into because that is a great piece of music. It's and it's just so fun to listen to. Ace just nails it.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody here is going to say anything negative about Ace, especially if we start talking about their appearance on the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder, which Don was kind enough to sit in for like 45 minutes once while I broke down the clips on that.
That's a classic.
What were you going to say, Martin?
Well, you're talking about hair metal Alice. It's like all this big bank of solo albums leading up to the Blackout years and then hair metal Alice. This is the only hair metal proto hair metal Alice there is. So to me, this is so much like Kiss Destroyer and a little bit like Ted Nugent and Aerosmith and Moxie and Derringer kind of thing. This is like a bright American participating corporate rock album. And the songs, especially like Department of Youth, Cold Ethel, Escape, not so much the two heavy ones on side one, but they're so up tempo and breezy and American and sun dappled stadium rock sort of feel that this is the only time in this whole catalog where he makes kind of like he participates in that Kiss Aerosmith Ted Nugent proto hair metal thing. And then of course he goes basically easy listening general rock for a long time, and then he has the blackout years, and then he comes back on with the new record deal, and he's actual hair metal. So that's why I like this one. This is my favorite of them, because to me the earlier ones, like I say, I've got this thing about, they just seemed even to us as kids, they just seemed creepy and Munsters like, right? They just seemed black and white. They all sounded like the front and back cover of Love It to Death, basically, to me. And I don't think any of them sound good production wise. I think Bob Ezrin has cardboard production values on all of those albums. And this is the best produced album of that entire run, really, up until it's probably the best period. It's the most lush, expensive sounding 70s album.
Those early Alice Cooper records though were it was 70s. That was the way the 70s were. That's how the band sounded, and that's how they recorded them. I think they're brilliant, and I think, for example, Halo of Flies is one of the heaviest songs that came out in like 1971. That some of the riffs on that song, and that song in general, I would put it up against any Black Sabbath song as being super heavy.
Yep.
I agree.
I don't know, man. I mean, written that way, sure, but produced and played that way. I mean, you would put that up against all the heavy songs on Master of Reality. I mean, Master of Reality would just bulldoze that thing to the ground, right?
Well, hold on.
In your opinion, Martin.
What were you going to say, Mark?
Hold on, Brian. I agree with Brian. Songwriting wise, it does. But I would go with Martin. Yeah, production wise, no. The Sabbath it just fucking clobbers.
Well, that's I mean, look, that's Iommi's guitar tone. You can't argue against that. That's clearly heads above anything else that was happening. But I love 70s production, and I'm an old guy, so I grew up in the 70s. But I always defend it because so many people go, that sounds so lame and da da da. Well, it's real instruments being played by real people as opposed to computer.
Well, yeah, I love 70s production too, but I mean, all those Alice Cooper albums would be in the bottom quartile for like dynamic bass. Treble, cymbals, bass.
Wow.
Really?
I mean, why is Martin on this podcast?
Well,
he hates Alice Cooper.
Also, can someone look up quartile? Because,
if we were able to take the wave files from sort of what you're talking about from Alice and match it up, it would probably look the same way that a Carpenter's song would look. So I think I know, because you're talking about Alice being easy listening. And if you only know him from his singles after this, you got I Never Cry, You and Me, and How You Gonna See Me Now. And you're like, what happened to this guy? Those albums, I love all those albums that I just listed off.
Look, the guitar playing on Wish You Were Here, that whole it's just fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think Martin, and I want to agree with my fellow author Martin Popoff. I'm only 129 books behind him, but
149.
Okay, 150. All right, so I'm way behind. But listen, if you didn't know Alice Cooper before this, you did after this, and that's the bottom line. That whether or not this is the album, also that Bob Ezrin began an incredible tear of taking classic bands and giving their sound a bigger, fuller dynamic. Obviously, he did it with this album. The next year, he did it with Kiss Destroyer. 2 years or 3 years after that, he did it with Pink Floyd, The Wall. So he found this way to take these classic 70s bands and make their sound just more full and bigger. And I know it definitely turned some fans off, but it gained all those bands way, way, way more fans. And again, not knowing that this was an Alice thing, and we're putting Alice out front, but then you see the ABC live concert video from this tour, and I've watched it several times over the years. It's almost like the band doesn't exist. It's Alice in the front, and the band is all in dark. And then it's all the stage show, the characters, the choreography, and the stunts and all that. So, in hindsight, when you look at it, you go, wow, they really were pushing Alice out into the front and pushing the other guys into the back.
But you know what? They were doing that even before then. If you watch the $1 Billion Babies live footage, that was the first tour where Alice is out front and the rest of the guys are all the way in the back, Glenn Buxton's not even there because he can barely play, and they had to have another guy in the back playing. But they were all in the back and pretty much in the dark for most of the set. It was all Alice in front. So they had been doing that starting in 73. Obviously, with Welcome to My Nightmare, it became even more apparent because Alice was at that point a solo artist. But I think to your point too, it became huge because this is a much more commercial record than any of the early Alice stuff, even though they had some huge hits there. Like this stuff, ballads. I mean, Only Women Bleed, or sorry, Only Women, became, like, I think his first ever one of his first #1 hits and massive radio song. And that's really what propelled this record to be a big thing. But I do want to defend one thing about the title track, because everybody seems to really not like the song Welcome to My Nightmare, but I love it. And I
do
think
too. Yeah.
I think that guitar, that riff, that opening riff is pure evil. I mean, it's so heavy, even though it's acoustic guitar. It's like da 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 da. That's like really dark stuff.
But again, go back again, as I say all the time, timeline is everything.
Yes.
I was expecting the first chords of Detroit Rock City, if to use that as an example. And I was ready for just what the doctor ordered, or Back in the Saddle. I that's what I wanted, and I got okay.
Yeah. I think if you go in with a preconceived notion of what you're looking for, then and you want the heaviness, this certainly is not his heaviest record by far, even though there's some highlights on it. But I like the diversity of it. I like I said, the subject matter and the way he's singing is just, and I do love the humor part of it too. I love horror movies with humor in it, and that's kind of what this album is. It's like a horror movie with some humor in it. But it is, a lot of the subject matter, even like Steven and Welcome to My Nightmare, it's all pretty dark stuff, which I quite enjoyed.
You say it's not as heaviest, but with 5 more or less hard rocking songs, I mean, that kind of pushes it ahead of Muscle of Love, School's Out. Certainly the first 2, the Zappa Years ones, right? I mean, maybe not Billion Dollar Babies. That would come pretty close. But the funny thing is, the heaviness, like you say, Brian, there's a certain different level of heavy metalness to something like Halo of Flies, that evilness, that forebodingness that's there. And to me, again, what I liked about these songs is it had that brighter, kid-friendly hard rockiness to those songs, except again the ones on the first side. But again, a kid would just love this thing because of the cover art with the bugs in the background and songs, titles like Devil's Food and Black Widow. We know Vincent Price is there. It's funny. I was playing this to prepare. Half of Devil's Food is that Vincent Price thing, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
He's like a very large chunk of it at the end, right?
Awesome.
So that again, as kids, when we were measuring everything mathematically, almost by heaviness, this actually did kind of come out okay. And but we gave Alice a little bit extra because he was so scary. And that's another thing I got to stress about him in the early days. We were scared to hell of Alice Cooper. I mean, there was I remember we subscribed to I think it was Newsweek magazine, not Time, and there was actually an article on Alice in there with a really creepy looking picture of him, right? And you think of the leotard with the rips in it and stuff. Like, he was really disturbing. He was the Marilyn Manson of our day, right? And you didn't feel that with these other bands, and all of that is subtly built up in an artistic way through those early albums, which again didn't feel super heavy in our brains. We were into Nazareth, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, BTO even at that time, right? So that's why those kind of fell in the background. But at this point, it's like, okay, Alice is now part of our world a lot more, and maybe we're even a little less scared of him now.
Well, I think now, I mean, you just have to be scared of his golf handicap. I don't know that there's anything else you need to actually be terrified for. Interestingly, to sort of look back at this time, what Martin's saying is that he's Marilyn Manson before Marilyn Manson. But the way you guys were talking about how he got put out in the forefront, this is the first time I realized he was Gwen Stefani before Gwen Stefani was Gwen Stefani. Tell me what any of the other guys in No Doubt look like. I have no idea, So that's really what they did with him. And by the way, Only Women Bleed did actually go to #1, but only in Martin's homeland of Canada. It was a number 12 song here. School's Out was only a number 7 here. But, he obviously, that's when top 40 was top 40, when you'd be mixing in Alice Cooper songs.
Yeah, I think I was probably just a victim of living in Los Angeles. I swear, I think I heard that on the radio like every 5th song. And it was probably #1 in LA, but maybe not nationwide.
what I want to
while we're talking about just this record, one of my little pet peeves, this is crazy, and this is the Kiss fan in me coming out, drove me crazy, still does, that Alice is not wearing makeup on this cover. Don't get me wrong, I love the cover, but if you look at, I think it's some of the European tour posters, they did put makeup on him. And
well, I think
this would have been even creepier had he had his makeup on.
Well, you're right about that, and I remember when this record came out, and in subsequent years, talking to Alice and Shep and stuff about what was going on back then. And Martin mentioned it too. Like in 1975, he was scary. Like he was the scariest man in music. Like everybody was afraid. His shows were frightening. Like, and this was a solo record, so I think that we're gonna put him in a tuxedo, make him look like a respectable human being. We'll take the makeup off as the dichotomy of like he's not the most evil guy on the planet. And he was kind of making fun of the fact that, you know, I'm the most evil guy, but look, here I am in a top hat and a nice suit and no makeup on. So they were kind of making a joke about, you know, where he kind of was. And it was very much intentioned for that to be that way. And they hunted him on the cover as well, because it was, again, as we mentioned before, his first solo record. And that was important to both Alice and Shep too. So it was a really interesting time when all that happened. But I love the cover. I got it. I thought this is the coolest thing ever.
It's a very cool cover. Yeah.
I just wish he would have had his trademark makeup on. That's
it's interesting because, you know, there's those periods where he doesn't wear the makeup, and the next one would actually be Mark's favorite album, Trash. You know, he sort of like loses the makeup again, and then we should do a whole separate show sometime about the 4 early 80s albums, all of which have things that I like very much. But that Special Forces look that he did, I still don't understand what he was going for. And I don't think he did either.
No, he was, that was when he was addicted. It was freebasing like crazy back then. So
I got to bring this story up because I think you gentlemen would all appreciate it. Do you guys, have you seen, in retrospect, have you seen when, it was when what's the follow-up to this? Lace and Whiskey. Oh no, actually
Go to Hell's the next one.
Go to Hell. Goes to Hell.
Anyway, I'm talking about Lace and Whiskey.
Yeah.
When Lace and Whiskey came out, I'll never forget. Have you guys seen when he was on Johnny Carson?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, dude, just again because it's timeline. I remember seeing in TV Guide that he was going to be on Johnny Carson. For some reason, all I remember is I had to ask my mom to stay up late. Don't worry, I had super cool parents. And I'm like, Mom, Alice Cooper's going to be on. Johnny Carson's on at midnight. Can I stay up? She's like, okay. And I'm fucking like, oh my God, I cannot wait. I'm sitting there just waiting for Alice to come on. He comes on and I'm like, huh? And then he's got the dancing chickens. I about started crying. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And that was, I to this day, that drives me crazy. And you have to see that Johnny Carson thing when he comes on with, I think it was a machine gun. I've since watched it again, but I remember that day, and my mom and I are looking at each other. I'm like, where's the spiders and the snakes? And school's out. And I was like, oh my God, is this bad?
Yeah. That was Hollywood Alice. That was in his Hollywood years where he's.
Oh yeah, that's Hollywood Squares Alice. That's everything.
Hollywood Vampires Alice, right?
True.
And Ringo Starr, John Lennon.
By the way, by the way, I'm reading Bernie Taupin's book right now, which is really good, and he's got a lot of great Alice Cooper stories because they were pretty much best friends. So it was really kind of interesting hearing him, talk about Alice in the 70s as well.
Yeah, no, and obviously responsible for what is still my favorite Alice Cooper album, From the Inside, which might be a hot take for some people, but I know Don Jamieson agrees. Yeah,
I love that record. It's another one that we reissued, so that was fun.
I actually thanked you on Eddie Trunk's radio show many years ago for putting out the 2 albums I couldn't find anywhere, Muscle of Love and From the Inside, both of which I'm a huge fan of. But yeah, I mean, look. Lace and Whiskey, he's doing a character that I don't think I ever understood. But to bring it back to Welcome to My Nightmare, you can understand the story. Now, granted, I'm first getting to know these songs, probably seeing them live in concert. And, you've got like Dwight Fry sprinkled in there. But I feel like, okay, I get all of it. And then I get the VHS of that that ABC special. And yeah, look, there's elements to it that maybe didn't even hold up in 1990, but I was just amazed by it. I'm like, this was on TV. This is amazing. And that's when you really start to get the story. And I'm kind of wondering for any of you who, it's months before it's on TV, do you feel like there's a story, or do you not necessarily think about it? Or it's all like, okay, it's more of a vibe or a feeling. Let me ask you first, Don, did you feel like, okay, yeah, there's clearly, this is a concept album, as it were?
Yeah, I think, with Alice, everything was sort of a concept album. And, to this day, if you go see him, everything has an order in the show. What one thing transitions him to get into the next part of the show. And I think also the same with the album, like everything kind of transitions to each thing for a certain reason. And whether you kind of know it or not, but it is a nightmare, right? I mean, it says it in the title. You got your anthems and stuff sprinkled in there, but it is interesting because we talked about Escape. Like, how would this album would have ended without Escape? You couldn't have ended it on The Awakening. That's just too weirdo of a track to just fade to black right after that. So Escape gives this entire piece an ending. Now you get to escape from the nightmare. So, yeah, I always pictured this as a continuous story.
Yeah, and Escape is one of those songs that obviously you listen to it in the context of the album. It is a great way to end it, but it was only a few years ago, I don't know, 2019, maybe, whatever that tour is. I think Old Black Guys. All of a sudden that gets dropped into the set list. And that's one of the best things about going to see Alice. If you're a fan of the entire catalog, sometimes you're going to get caught in a dream from Love It to Death, or you're like, oh shit, that's the opening notes to Escape. So, it's when, for me anyway, I really appreciate, what, Clones isn't such a weird song after all. It's actually a pretty great song.
I love Clones.
That whole album's great.
This is a
fashion. Yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting concept album because it's not like a King Diamond concept album where there's a story that runs through all the songs, but it is about nightmares. Everything on there pretty much is not some sort of nightmare or bad thing or creepy thing. So I got that even as a kid, that it wasn't, and I wasn't really sure what a concept record really was at that point, but it was just similar topics. So I kind of figured that out, but it wasn't like there was no storyline, like I said, like a King Diamond or something like that.
Yeah, and this might be the first actual concept album that I sat down with and listened to, even though it's, years later. And I guess, that's what happens when you grow up in, the MTV generation and you've seen things. So you think of the visuals, the way that it factors in. But I think it's obviously it's a tremendous record, and there's so much stuff that still gets played. I like the way that, I guess, Black Widow and Devil's Food has kind of turned into Let's Let Alice Take a Breather. God bless him that he's still doing it. And those songs are somehow even heavier, the way that, the current incarnation comes out and plays them. And you'd think that Alice, being that guy who's in the forefront, you're going to miss him when he's not on stage. But it's just like, what, good for him. Let him take a little bit of a rest, because his band is so great. And those songs, 50 years later, still, kick so much ass.
Christian, if I could just add about the concept thing, I think this is a really smart, grown-up, mature concept, in that it's not, the warrior clan comes and the magic sword comes out and there's all these names of people all through it. To me,
are you trying to talk about Music from the Elder without saying Music from the Elder, Martin?
I suppose so, yeah. But it's such a cool thing where you go, hey, let's just write an album about nightmares. Your Alice Cooper, it's going to make perfect sense. And I love, Welcome to My Nightmare, Devil's Food, The Awakening, Escape, and so Escape gives you two things. It gives you the, when you're writing fiction, they say, oh, you should challenge yourself and end with some hope, right? And in any kind of fiction you're writing, it's doing that, but it's also doing that thing where it's like sending you out of the theater onto Broadway on a happy note kind of thing after a production, right? So it serves those two purposes for an ending. But yeah, I think when you come up with a concept like this, it allows you to do all sorts of loose things within the concept. And it's just a brilliant one, right? Like the other one I always love is just the idea of Porcupine Tree, Fear of a Blank Planet. about kids, and they're addicted to their video games or porn, and they're all on pills, and stuff like that. Like, just a brilliant idea. And there's so many dumb ideas for concept albums that it's just really cool that they could put this together this way. And I'm sure a lot of that is the genius of Bob Ezrin.
Well,
Yeah, no, exactly. To be able to harness Alice and put it into the theme. And Mark, in a second, I'll certainly let you finish that thought. I just wanted to throw in you guys have talked about how every track on the album is a nightmare, except for Don, because to him, Cold Ethel is just flirting. What were you going to say, Mark?
Oh no, I was going to say again, because of timeline. When we were kids, I just listened to this. Did I know it was supposed to be a concept? I guess. But this record, much like as we got older, when we rewatch cartoons as adults, I'm talking about the cartoons we watched when we were kids, or even like the Three Stooges or something. You missed stuff when you were a kid. You're like, oh, because Martin brought up a great point. You're right. The escape is like, hey, wake up. It's it. We're done. This is a fun way to end this. We're getting out of here. And I actually did realize that, probably sometime in the 80s when I was a little bit older, when I could appreciate the storytelling of it all. But, back when we were kids, I just went, fucking Black Widow. You know what I mean? I didn't think too much of the concept. Again, conscious of one, but
Sure.
It just didn't matter. It was just good. It was just fun. That was all.
Christian, I just want to defend myself because you evoked my name. But I just want a woman in my life who loves me as much as Alice loved Ethel.
Yeah, but I think that's fair. And
she was his paradise.
I know you're still
in 97. He'd still be waiting there in refrigerator heaven. That's love, my friend.
That is actually. You know what? You're right. I'm sorry. It is the most romantic song that he's ever written, even more than How You Gonna See Me Now. To what Mark's talking about, before we start to try and wind things down, perfect example deals with Alice. So like seeing Alice Cooper, if you were to look at the episode of the Muppet Show he did a little bit after this, I saw that as a kid and I think, didn't get most of it, but now you watch it, it's so funny. He's just like trying to get every single one of the Muppets to sign their soul away to Satan. And I'm like, oh, and that was on network TV, everybody, in 1976 or whatever he did it. So it's always great to, have somebody like Alice who kind of gets that, like, well, there's a way that this darkness and evil can still play for the whole family. Obviously, we could do this for another hour, and there's so many other albums that we could. I want to give everybody a chance for any final thoughts on this record. Any tidbits? I mean, we've kind of called out pretty much every song on the album, and I am with Brian. I always liked the song "Welcome to My Nightmare," but probably the first time I heard it, it was being played live. So that I'm probably a little cornered by that. But when you think of this album, what do you think of first? We'll kind of go clockwise. Brian, is it one of the songs? Is the title track? Is there anything that? Oh yeah, "Welcome to My Nightmare" and something you associate with that?
Well, it's an interesting record for me. I love the record, loved it when it came out, but it and a lot of everybody else has kind of talked about this, the production and things. Like for me, at 15, I was Kiss and Black Sabbath and Judas Priest and like all the heavy stuff. I wanted heavy stuff. I didn't like ballads. I didn't like power ballads. I didn't like any of that. But when this record came out, I don't know what it is, because like the big production with the horns and all that sort of stuff, normally that's something that I wouldn't like. But for some reason, it worked on this record. I don't really know what it was or how it worked, but it just worked. And like I said, I was a 14-year-old kid when this record came out. I just thought it was great. I thought the whole thing was great. The concept was cool. The songs were great. And the production, even though it wasn't something I would normally listen to, for some reason, it just worked. So I've always thought this was a phenomenal record, and always happy to talk about it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's sort of like peak Alice. Everything about this album is the most Alice that it can be. What do you think, Martin, when you think of this album?
Yeah, I just say again, to reiterate, to me, it was the happy participating in the world corporate. It sounds like a Kiss album, Alice. It's not the cowering in the shadows monsters, Alice Cooper. And I think we appreciated that because, yeah, this was a golden period for Kiss and Aerosmith and Ted Nugent and stuff. It just felt really big and American and modern, and that's what we liked about it.
What about you, Don? Besides the now I admit that it is a romantic song called Ethel. Apart from that, apart from the hope that one day that's your wedding song.
Well, yeah, I think again, contrasting what they were doing with Alice here with his band, which was pushing them back, and as Brian mentioned, they were doing that years before, which probably led to a lot of the tension. And to see Alice now and how he features his band so upfront now, it's such a different animal. Now I understand it's 50 years later, but to push them back like that, I think that took away, because the Alice Cooper Goes to Hell is a good album, and then obviously I love From the Inside, but it kind of did start to tail off a little bit, and then that's when you start to realize, oh wow. Without Glenn and without Neil and without Michael and without Dennis, it's not quite the same as it was. Is this album a masterpiece? I say yes. It's not my favorite Alice album, but I do think it's a masterpiece, and I would still give it to somebody if they wanted to learn about Alice Cooper. And always happy to tell people to this day in 2025, and please still go see him because he's still great.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I definitely, and I've been with my wife 20 years now, and I've dragged her to see Alice Cooper so many times in the first few years we were dating, and I think if I'd had a ring, I would have proposed on the spot when we went in. I think it was 2008, and she was just like, "Oh, that was such a great show. Can we go to the merch table so I can buy a shirt?" And I was like, yeah, I don't care how much traffic that. Yes. You know what? Let's buy 2 shirts, let's just go ahead. And he will win anybody over. I feel like he's never going to stop, but I also have to bring my 9-year-old and 7-year-old to see him while they still can. So yeah, I agree on all that. And finally, Mark, any big thoughts come to mind when you think of Welcome to My Nightmare?
Well, this record was really part of the wave. And as I said to you guys earlier in the conversation, there's a reason why this is why the dam busted. And this was a big part of it. But 1975, Sabotage, the first Ted Nugent record, this Toys in the Attic. You could not be a sponge looking for water to get if you know what I mean. I was just soaking this stuff in like you would not believe. And obviously Kiss Alive. This was everything to me. It was like, anybody who knows me, when I was a kid, I was really into Universal monsters and Godzilla and stuff. But as soon as I started getting into music, I was all in. And the quality of the stuff that was available at the time, arguably, was the best of the best of all time. And this is one of those records, and this helped cement me into being an Alice fan. And you know what? I started bringing my son to see Alice Cooper. My son's now 32, but I was bringing him to go see Alice when he was like 7 and 8 years old or whatever. And to this day, if Alice comes to town, we still go. And it really was, make sure you take your kids to go see Alice. It's the perfect mixture of theater and rock and fun. And you know what I mean? It's funny too, because much like this record, he paces his show like that still. You have the dark part, blah, blah, blah. But what happens at the end? The white hat, school's out. You know what I mean? It was all good to go, man. So make sure you get them youngins into this stuff.
Well, while they still can, yeah. For me, I'd love for Lost in America to take a back seat from the set list. No one else has to comment on that, but it's okay. We could do a tour without it. But I agree, he's still so great. It's so much fun to see. And Mark, you mentioned Kiss Alive. That is another album that will turn 50, I believe, in September. So so many great big milestones. As we've mentioned, Mark is a part of the Kiss podcast, Three Sides of the Coin, and since we have these minds assembled here, I know we've gone a little long, but I have to ask them an important question. That is a question that stems from that show. Brian, Martin, Don,
I know where we're going here.
Did Vinnie Vincent save Kiss?
First of all, I want to do Mark's podcast.
You are welcome anytime, Brian.
As a massive Kiss fan,
Oh,
that's
love
an interesting question. I don't know that I really have an answer.
Well, my answer is that he is a part of what saved Kiss. That he
No,
contributed
you
some
got to
songs.
be. You got to be one or the other.
All right, then I'm gonna have to say. I'm gonna say yes. I'm glad Mark's here to enforce the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that he saved Kiss. I think that that time period was kind of reignited them a bit, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the Ankh makeup did not save Kiss, but the guy wearing the Ankh makeup did.
Yeah, it was not my favorite time period of Kiss. Let's just put it that way.
What do you think, Don?
I don't know if he saved Kiss, but I know he saved a bunch of dead dogs on his property.
That's very true. Yeah, and he saved Mark Singer from having to go out and get himself a regular day job just by being so difficult. It's like, hey, how about we kick Vinnie Vincent out of the Vinnie Vincent invasion? Great plan. What do you say to this, Martin? I know it can be a very loaded question, which is why I ended the show with it.
I'd say no. I mean, Paul and Gene would have wrote the songs. They would have found the songs. Finding a guitarist is a dime a dozen. I mean, they probably spent more energy, trying to keep Kiss together and keep Kiss fixed. So there's a lot of positives and negatives going along. But yeah, I think they had their powder dry enough that they would have figured out what to do. There were many people they could have gotten in that band, and like I say, if they didn't write the songs themselves, they can go find the songs.
Right, exactly. Brian Adams would have come along with War Machine either way. Go ahead.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Brian Adams saved Kiss.
Yeah.
If you ask me.
Just in on a rare serious note, Vinny wrote 8 of the 10 songs on Lick It Up. No Lick It Up, no success.
Well, no comeback with the makeupless Kiss. That started that era, right? So, but again, I agree with Martin. I mean, obviously Vinny did contribute, but those songs would have come together, I think, without him.
Look, Lick It Up. If they don't have that single, the trajectory, Lord knows, it may have went straight down. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a Vinnie Vincent lackey. I'm just trying to be historically accurate. He wrote 8 of the 10 songs on the first non-makeup record, and that record broke a streak of poor selling records. And what's the one?
You know what?
He wrote most of it.
Real quickly now I definitely have an opinion. He did not save Kiss. In fact, what he did was delayed the inevitable reunion tour, which I love to death. We probably could have seen that 3 or 4 years before that if it wasn't for Vinnie Vincent.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, no, but if they don't have the song Lick It Up, I don't know that All Hell's Breaking Loose was going to be the video smash hit that it was. Well, again, for more talk like this, 3 Sides of the Coin is a really fun listen. God, Mark, you were the new guy, and you've been doing it for like 10 years now. Am I right about that?
I think I'm on my 11th year.
Yeah.
They had another guy who seems like a nice guy. I really don't know him. But he was in for.
No, and a lot of people know Mitch LaFon was on before you were, so a lot of people know him. Yeah.
So and again, I have no problems with Mitch whatsoever. But I'm just saying he left, I think, after the 66th episode. And I think we're on, and I've been on since then, and we're, I think, into the 600s now. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So I've been there for quite a while.
Well, thank you for being a part of this, and I always enjoy seeing what you and Michael Brandvold, aka The Tool, and Tommy, and especially when Lisa's on. Don Jamieson, Rockstrap, can be found wherever podcasts are found, and I know you have an album that Brian would like to make sure that you sell more of, so let's tell people where they can find. He's got it right there. He's got the 2 most important albums ever released, Welcome to My Nightmare and No Sleep Till McSorley's.
If we're talking about great vinyl, there's probably 1 and 2 right here.
And you know what? Switch them around. Put Welcome to My Nightmare #2. Yeah, that's obviously what we need to do. Martin Popoff, you mentioned 5 podcasts when we started, and I've forgotten the names of all of them. But let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, just 2 audio podcasts, History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff and Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast. Then we've got our YouTube channel, The Contrarians.
Right. And Kicked in the Teeth is one that I definitely am going to take a deep dive on. And Martin, of course, is featured in every episode of 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal, trying to help educate while the rest of us have fun. Brian Slagel, also the host of 100 Songs That Define Heavy Metal. And of course, Metal Blade Records. What's new this week, next month? What's coming from Metal Blade that everybody should look out for, Brian?
Well, just came out Friday, the new Killswitch Engage record, which is phenomenal. We have we're not a singles label really, but there's a great song on there called I Believe that's now, I think, number 15 in the country on Active Rock and rising, as they say. So that's really cool. And go to metalblade.com. There's a million things coming out. But yeah, Killswitch record just came out doing really well.
And you can find me, Christian Bladt, on social media at Christian DMZ, my personal podcast, the Bladtcast, Bladtcast. And every Tuesday, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, on the Who Are These Podcasts YouTube channel. My buddy Eric Zane and I do Who Are These Broadcasters? So check that out. Thanks so much to all of you for staying so long. And it would have been very easy to just keep this going until the wee hours. But we'll do it again soon, I hope. Thanks again to everyone. And we'll see you next time.